It's Monday, July 4. In the headlines, JTA President speaks on JTC bill. Regionally, food and energy crisis dominates Caricom meeting. And in sports, Sir Vivian Richards receives Caricom's highest honor. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Simone Absalom Gale. The Jamaica Teachers Association, JTA, says it supports the idea of establishing a governing body mandated to ensure professional standards are maintained in the teaching profession. This, it says, will benefit teachers and, by extension, students. A committee is presently reviewing a proposed Jamaica Teaching Council bill that sets out such regulations. However, JTA cites several instances in the proposed bill that it has taken issue with. We caught up with JTA President Winston Smith recently. He says one of the major issues is the disciplinary action for teachers teaching without a license.
When a lawyer commits a breach, the lawyer is tried by the General Legal Counsel, not by the courts. The current JTC bill wants to take teachers to court.
In the last committee meeting, representative of private tutors and homeschooling parents, Maurice Saunders, told members of the committee there are many instances in which unlicensed individuals, such as neighbors who conduct summer school or older children who act as tutors, and these practices have been successful and should not be interfered with.
Not to interfere in the arrangements that they make privately with students and parents for private extra lessons. Let us look a little bit at the background to the issues and the problems. So we have the issues, and you have heard the recommendation. That is the short of it. But as I listened to this debate, to the discussion going on, I felt moved. I gave it more thought, and more ideas came to me.
Mr. Smith says effective regulations relative to the profession are already on the books in different documents, but reiterated that he is not opposed to one wholesome document.
If one should examine the Education Act of 1980, or the Education Act of 1964, and the regulation of 1980, you'd realize that there is sufficient body of laws and regulations that will advance the professional standing of the teachers of Jamaica. What we need is for a whole-scale education of the people who are governing and running education in Jamaica. In our reading of the Jamaica Teaching Council bill, in our estimation at the JTA, there are only two categories of people who would find the bill nice. The ones who have never read it and the ones who wrote it. Outside of that, anybody else who are well-thinking Jamaicans would realize that the JTC bill in its current state will not achieve the desired outcome, which is to professionalize education. So I want us to go back to the drawing board, have a real look at it again, if we're really serious about moving forward.
The review of the JTC bill continues, and the JTA president says the association will not allow teachers to be disenfranchised.
We have invested time, money, effort and energy. We have secured the services of a QC and several attorneys who are going through with us through this bill, line by line, letter by letter, word by word, to make sure that when it is that this bill is signed into law, it will truly reflect a professionalization of the teaching profession.
Jamaicans are reminded that they can easily access tax information if they are unsure what taxes are to be paid and how much. The information was shared by Tax Education Officer Antoinette Anderson on the recently aired episode of PBCJ Presents. Ms. Anderson explains what taxes are paid for persons employed by an organization.
The NIS is calculated on your gross emoluments. For persons who are employed, it's calculated on their gross emoluments. So the current NIS rate is 3%, and it's 3% for both the employer and the employee. The education tax is calculated by removing the NIS and these other exemptions and pension amounts. What is left is calculated at 2.25% for the employee. on the side of the employer, their rate is 3.5%. Current rate for NHT for employees is 2%, but the employer pays 3% on behalf of the employee. The income tax, on the other hand, is based on what your overall income is.
She shared what percentage must be paid if you are self-employed.
Naturally, the rates will be a little different. So like for a self-employed person who is contributing to NIS, their rate would be 6%. So they're paying collectively the amount that would have been paid if they were on the employed side of it. So that's 6% for NIS. They'll pay 3% for NHT, and is the same for education tax, 2.25%. Now, how it's calculated on the self-employed side of it is based on net profits, right? So if your net profits are in excess of the 1.5, yes, you're going to be required to pay the income tax.
She reminded Jamaicans there are thresholds in place, and each threshold tells us the amount of taxes due. Ms. Anderson further explained why it's important for Jamaicans to pay taxes.
The government cannot run the country without its major source of income, which comes directly from taxation or from taxes. Why you pay it? You're paying for roads, you're paying for schools, you're paying the teachers who have to go into these schools, you're paying for health workers, you're paying for the fire service, you're paying for the police, you're paying for the persons who are at the retention centers, what we call the prisons. You're paying for all of this. And it's best when everybody contributes their fair share. It's necessary.
You can find out more about taxes by visiting our YouTube page to view PBCJ Presents. Senior citizens 75 years and older are being encouraged to sign up to benefit from support under the Social Pension Program. Prime Minister Andrew Holness made the appeal during a visit to 105-year-old Winifred Stearns' Lords Road home in Kingston on Friday. He says, quote, "They are entitled to it even if they were not employed or were not contributing to a pension, because we have taken the position that the vulnerable in our society, we have to protect them." End quote. Mr. Holness says seniors without a pension are unable to go out and work for money or find alternative means of income. He notes as well that their children may not be able to take care of them, hence the importance of putting in place this social pension. The Social Pension Program targets seniors who are not currently in receipt of a pension, retirement, old age or disability benefit or income, or are not living in a government institutionalized care facility and are generally described as vulnerable. For seniors who are unable to visit the offices, their caregiver or someone acting on behalf of that senior can submit an application to the ministry. The senior citizen or representative will be required to complete an application form accompanied by the individual's tax registration number, TRN, proof of age in the form of a birth certificate or a valid passport. They should also take along a valid identification such as a driver's license, passport, or voter's identification. The 43rd regular meeting of Caricom heads of government has opened with an acknowledgement of severe global crises in 3 vital areas: food, energy, and finance. More from Gabriel Thompson.
It came from the Secretary General of the Regional Bloc, Dr. Carla Barnett, during the opening ceremony of the meeting being held in Suriname. She called for regional cohesion as she notes the solutions to the challenges facing the region will require collective intellect and for member states to act together. While noting there has been some headway in response to calls for greater access to climate financing, Dr. Barnett also highlighted the strides being made to boost food production in the region.
This has gone beyond focusing on the objective of cutting the regional food import bill by 25% by 2025, important as that is, to encompassing comprehensive actions to create an agri-food sector that will finally put our region on the road to self-sufficiency. This work has become even more crucial given the global food crisis, first triggered by the supply chain difficulties and then vastly worsened by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, involving two countries that produce a significant amount of the world's grain and wheat.
Dr. Barnett says a major consideration going forward will be improving the lives of young people, as 60% of the region's population is under the age of 30.
Our young people are central to our efforts at building a sustainable and resilient society. We must therefore never cease in our attempts to create opportunities to develop and utilize their creativity and innovative skills, and to explore avenues to facilitate youth involvement in planning and preparation for the future. A Caricom Youth Forum was held last month, which brought together youth groups, youth leaders, youth workers, and other key stakeholders to examine current youth development needs. The Dean of the Caricom Youth Ambassadors will present to this conference salient recommendations arising from the event for the attention of the heads of government.
Also speaking at Sunday's opening ceremony were several of the newest Caricom leaders, including Philip Davis of the Bahamas. He says while the region is affected by external challenges, sometimes members are guilty of standing in the way of their own progress.
We find it easy to walk away from settled agreements to pursue the cause which we think will help our narrow national interests. Too many times, our countries have acquiesced to the pressures of larger, more developed states and the multinational corporations. Their approach of divide and conquer has hurt us all. Might we be deriving greater value from our tourism industries if we had continued to negotiate in concert with some of the large multinational corporations? And might we have fared better during the COVID-19 pandemic if we had acted together to secure vaccines and medicines?
Meanwhile, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip J. Pierre, called on Caribbean leaders to move swiftly to create a lasting, reliable and affordable regional transportation infrastructure. He says there can be no meaningful integration without the free movement of people.
To put it directly, colleagues, Caricom needs LIATs, or Caricom needs a better version of LIATs. Unless one of our island-owned carriers emerges as a truly regional carrier, not only in terms of countries covered, but with a philosophical commitment to making regionalism work for Caricom citizens, then our regional aspirations will continue to be an elusive dream.
Representing Jamaica is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith.
Plans are reportedly advanced in the creation of a registry for small ruminants. The registry will allow for identification and tracking of specific breeds developed in Jamaica. Marlon Samuels has the details in this report.
The government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, has implemented a national animal identification and traceability system. The proposed small ruminant registry will meet the National Animal Identification Program requirements, including the issuing of a registration certificate. The registration certificate is an official document which includes information such as who owns the goat, date of birth, the breed, a color description, and unique identifying marks, if any.
A registry gives us the opportunity to track and trace animals which have been bred here in Jamaica, so we'll know the full genetic background and be able to properly identify these animals as they are bred and developed here in Jamaica.
The registry is just one way of tracking and protecting goat and sheep farmers. They are also encouraged to work in cluster groups,
where we're sharing knowledge, we're sharing, our experiences, and whenever a farmer have a problem, we can all go to help him, and within our communities we can go and help him. And Preda Larson is another big thing. within those cluster groups and you have a community, if you see some strange people coming inside there, you can call. You have your WhatsApp groups, which is very important. You know, a lot of these guys have WhatsApp group. You can, you know, WhatsApp and see a strange car coming in the area, so that we all can just go ahead and protect each other as we go along.
Some of the top breeds of goats and sheep will be on display at this year's staging of the Denby Agricultural and Industrial Food Show, beginning July 30, 2022. For the news on PBCJ, I am Marlon Samuels.
Time now for the business report with Danita Rodney.
The Jamaica Stock Exchange has announced the upcoming launch of the Caribbean Business Exchange, CBEX. CBEX will be a cable TV channel set to broadcast content and messaging from the JSE and its stakeholders. It will also allow the company the option of presenting extended and in-depth market-relevant information to the public, which would not otherwise be viable on a regular television programming schedule. Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Friday, July 1, the US dollar sold for an average of $151.56. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $121.24. The pound sterling traded for $181.70, and the euro sold for an average of $159.32. The following reflects the movement of the JSE indices in Friday's trading session. The JSE index advanced by 2,141 points to close at over 300,000 units. The junior market index declined by 12 points to close at over 4,000 units. The combined market index advanced by 1,890 points to close at over 400,000 units. And the All Jamaican Composite Index advanced by 2,638 points to close at over 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 106 stocks, of which 53 advanced, 38 declined, and 15 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 1834 Investments Limited, Barita Investments Limited, and Berger Paints Jamaica Limited. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited. Trading firm were CAC 2000 9.5% cumulative redeemable preference shares, Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances Limited, and Epley Limited 7.75% preference shares. The following companies represent the overall volume leaders: Siboney Group Limited, Radio Jamaica Limited, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial, all with over 2 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund was the only active security with over 20,000 shares. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Government of Barbados Bond Series B was the sole security trading over 32,000 shares. In market data for oil prices reversed losses and edged up as concerns of tight supply amid unrest in Libya and sanctions on Russia outweighed fears of a global recession. Brent crude rose 55 cents to $112.18, and West Texas Intermediate crude gained 44 cents to $108.87 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In regional news, the Cayman Islands government, through the Ministry of Agriculture, is moving forward to establish direct agricultural trade links with Honduras to strengthen the island's food and nutrition security.
Now, this follows an exploratory mission to Honduras last week led by the Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable J.E. Banks, Chief Officer Eric Bush, other representatives of the government, as well as members of the private sector. Minister Ebanks says we largely depend on the United States for our fruits, produce, and other goods. With the increase in cost of living, the government is committed to exploring various avenues to lessen the burden for the people of the Cayman Islands. Now, earlier in May, the Ministry of Agriculture approved a broadened list of agricultural produce that's being able to be imported into the Cayman Islands under a new import-export arrangement with Jamaica. The produce added to the list are plantain, breadfruit, soursop, as well as blanched and frozen acquis.
In Grenada, the National Democratic Congress government is living up to another major promise made to the Grenadian people and in particular the nation's youth. Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell recently announced that at the start of the new school year in September 2022, students will receive their education for free.
This was disclosed in his reasoning for answers to Grenada's oil and gas discovery and the benefits that can be derived from such a venture. He said that with CPEA results recently announced, he has been approached by a parent seeking assistance with the payment of secondary school fees.
I mean, a young lady called me today to say it's $310 for the school fees for St. David's Secondary School. Her child passed CPA. Can I help her? Right? And I said to her, she said registration is Friday. I said to her, just hold a sec. Once the cabinet is appointed, we did indicate that we would be taking steps to ensure that these fees do not prevent our students from entering secondary school or entering primary school, as the case may be. So obviously I expect the Minister of Education and the Ministry of Finance will do what is required to ensure that students are registered and not prevented from registration because of $300.
He says that government will have to come up with whatever mechanism or subvention needed by the schools to ensure children are not hindered from their education.
Imagine this. Your child has just passed CPA. The child is probably ecstatic to be going on with her life, and you have a mom or dad who can't afford and doesn't have the registration fee. What happens? You can't enter school as a result of that? I mean, in 2022, that shouldn't be happening. So again, that is what we need the oil and gas money for to be able to address. So
this is the second major announcement made by Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell since taking the prime ministerial position. Thursday evening, he announced the repayment of docked salary from protesting teachers in 2018.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has declared violence in Trinidad and Tobago a public health emergency. Speaking at the VIP lounge at the PBCJ International Airport, Dr. Rowley said violence is becoming too prevalent and as a result, the public is becoming too desensitized to the issue. TTT's Kimberly D'Souza has more.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley made the announcement minutes after police responded to a quadruple murder at Damien Bay in Maracas on Saturday afternoon. The victims, who hail from Santa Cruz, have been identified as Karen Pope, Elijah Farrell, CJ Dan and Mincy Boy. Hours earlier, on Saturday morning, 3 suspects were murdered following a police shootout in Port of Spain. 2 others are in critical condition. Dr. Rowley said we need to find solutions to treating with violence in our population.
In the home, in the school, on the roadway, public safety and public security, unfortunately, has pushed itself up to, it is number 2, because we still maintain that educating our population is number 1 from the standpoint of budgetary allocation. But from the standpoint of national unease, I would say that this violence, which is a public health emergency, has pushed itself up to the number 1 concern in our country.
Dr. Rowley warned the population about taking advice from those who propose to offer solutions.
I simply want to warn the population that half of the people who are offering you solutions to fighting our criminal scourge and curse are themselves contributors to the problem.
Dr. Rowley said violence is a specialist area, revealing that experts were involved in treating with the issue before the pandemic. He added that the section will be revisited soon.
In Antigua, the head of the Social Security Board has called out those whom he says misled the public into thinking that the team does not care about the beneficiaries they serve.
David Matthias, however, says he has no issue with people holding the board accountable for its long-standing cash flow challenges. Matthias made the comments during a recent interview with ABS's Jamie J. O'Shea.
Despite what is seen on placards and what is shared on the radio, we are far from wicked, and we do not treat anyone as though they're beneath us or like dogs, right?
Social Security Executive Director David Matthias responding to harsh criticisms from some members of the public.
I've seen that, and that hurts. That pains me. That bothers me, because I know that as board, as minister, as director of Social Security, management and staff of Social Security, we make an effort every single day just to discharge our responsibility.
He says sometimes they get it wrong and other times right. But whatever the result, they always keep beneficiaries' best interests at heart.
In sports, Harborview are champions of the 2021-2022 Jamaica Premier League JPL season. Harborview defeated Dumbarholden 6-5 in sudden death penalties on Sunday night at Sabina Park. The teams played to a 1-0 score after regular and extra time. This marks Harborview's 5th Premier League title. They are now tied for the second spot with Arnett Gardens, Tivoli and Santos with most titles. Portmore United reigns with 7 national titles. Meanwhile, last season's champions Cavalier took 3rd place after defeating Waterhouse 4-1 in the earlier game. West Indies have taken a 1-0 lead in their T20 International series against Bangladesh when they won match number 2 on Sunday. Playing at Windsor Park in Dominica, the Windies batted first and made 193 for 5. Jamaicans Rovman Powell and Brandon King scored 61, unbeaten and 57 respectively. We have some highlights from that innings. Bangladesh was restricted to 158 for 6, which meant the Windies won by 35 runs. Barbadian and former English batsman Roland Butcher has launched his line of training cricket bats. He shared the reason why he decided to go into this venture.
I found that in my playing career, a lot of balls came off the inside edge and went towards mid-wicket, etc., etc. That bothered me.
Off of your bat, Roland?
Yes, yes. And that bothered me throughout my career. And at the end of my career, I felt that I needed to try and produce something that would, that could do and deal with that. So what I actually did was I first designed a bat for myself and used it. I trialed it, tested it.
He explained before launching he commissioned a study on the bats.
I got them to Loughborough University. We did a 2-year study on the bats and then produced a thesis which confirmed that the bats improved the players significantly in all the areas that I had suggested. And there was one surprising factor in that the research showed that the bats also improved the bowler's accuracy, which was a bit of a shock to me because I wasn't thinking about the bowlers in any way. I was just thinking purely about the batsmen.
The launch of the bats will be on July 18 at Lord's Cricket Ground in the UK, which he made clear was trademarked. He was speaking on the recently aired episode of Line and Length. Antiguan and Barbudan cricket legend and national hero Sir Vivian Richards received Caricom's highest honour during the opening ceremony of the Caricom Heads of Government meeting on Sunday. The former West Indies batsman was among 4 Caricom nationals conferred with the Order of the Caribbean Community, OCC. Prime Minister of Antigua, Gaston Brown, says Sir Richards was by far the most devastating batsman in cricket and commanded respect both on and off the field. He also says Sir Richards and cricket shaped the Caribbean identity and that the recognition by Caricom is the most fitting for a man who has dedicated his talents and beliefs towards making our region stand tall. The award honors Caribbean nationals who would have made a significant impact in economics, politics, society, and culture. Other awardees were former Caricom Secretary General Ambassador Erwin LaRocque, Calypsonian David Rudder, and Barbados' former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister Dame Billy Miller. That's the news on PBCJ. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we are the People's Station.